My name is Sarah, and I'm 26 years old. Life hasn't exactly been easy. I lost both of my parents in a tragic car accident when I was very young. With no extended family to take me in, I spent 3 years in an orphanage before being adopted. My adoptive parents were extraordinary people, kind, compassionate, and as I later discovered, billionaires. They gave me a life I never dreamed of: safety, opportunity, and most of all, love. But they were private, humble people who didn't flaunt their wealth or even mention my adoption to anyone. They believed in doing good quietly. When I turned 18, I moved out on my own while my adoptive parents traveled through Europe, expanding their business ventures. Around that time, I met Mark, my now ex-husband. We were both in college, and our connection was instant. Mark was warm, funny, and supportive. Over time, our friendship blossomed into a serious relationship. By the time we graduated and had started our careers, we'd been together for 4 years and were engaged. That's when I met his parents. Mark had always warned me his family was judgmental. They were wealthy, traditional, and obsessed with appearances. He feared they wouldn't approve of me, not because of who I was, but because of where I came from. I tried to stay hopeful, but I was nervous. "They're going to hate me," I confessed the night before. "They won't," he promised. "Even if they do, it doesn't matter. I love you." We agreed to keep our engagement a secret just until we got a sense of how they'd react to me. I even wore my ring on a necklace, tucked under my blouse. We met them at an upscale restaurant. Mark held my hand as we walked in. We were just 2 minutes late, but that was already a strike against me. His parents, Abigail and Charles, barely acknowledged me. They spoke only to Mark, ignoring me like I wasn't even there. Finally, Mark introduced me. "This is Sarah, my girlfriend," he said firmly. I smiled and greeted them politely. Abigail responded with a cold hi. Then came the interrogation. "So, Sarah," she said with a tight smile, "I hear you and Mark met in college?" "Yes," I replied. "We had a few classes together." "And how did you get into such a prestigious school?" her husband interjected. "The tuition is steep. Admissions are competitive." "I was lucky to receive a full scholarship," I said, trying to stay composed. "I'm very grateful, not just for the education, but for meeting Mark." Abigail scoffed. "Of course you are. He's loaded, and you clearly need the money. At least you're smart. Can't say much about your looks." Mark stood up. "That's enough," he snapped. "We're leaving." As we walked out, I felt crushed. I hadn't said or done anything to deserve such cruelty. They hated me, not for who I was, but for who I wasn't. The car ride home was silent. Mark was fuming. When we got back, he asked if I was okay. But I wasn't. I was humiliated, shaken, and deeply hurt. After that, Mark cut off contact with his parents for weeks. They accused him of being disrespectful for walking out. When he finally responded, it was to tell them we were engaged. Their reaction? Outrage. They offered to pay for our wedding, on the condition that they controlled every detail. We refused and eloped. My adoptive parents, still in Europe, fully supported our decision and even sent us a beautiful and very expensive painting as a wedding gift. A few months later, Abigail and Charles invited us to their anniversary party. I was cautiously optimistic. Maybe they were ready to make peace. I was wrong. The moment we arrived, it was clear I wasn't welcome. Guests followed Abigail and Charles's lead, ignoring me completely. They spoke only to Mark, glancing at me like I didn't belong. Every attempt I made to join a conversation was brushed off. Then came the toast. "We're so lucky to be surrounded by the people who matter most," Abigail said with a smile, and a pause long enough for her meaning to sting. Laughter followed. The message was clear, I didn't count. I quietly slipped out and called an Uber, tears streaming down my face on the ride home. When Mark came home hours later, he was furious. "Why did you walk out like that?" he snapped. "Do you know how embarrassing that was for me?" I stared at him, stunned. "You!" I was humiliated in front of everyone. "Your parents mocked me in their toast." "I'm not saying it was right," he said, "but it was one night. You could have handled it. It was their anniversary, Sarah. They laughed at me," I whispered. "Everyone did." "Well, now my parents expect an apology," he said coldly. "An apology?" I repeated, barely believing my ears. "From me?" I stared at Mark in disbelief. Asterisk, you want me to apologize? I asked, incredulous. I want one from them first. They humiliated me. His eyes hardened. Maybe my parents were right about you. You're impossible. And with that, he stormed off to the guest bedroom. I sat frozen. This wasn't the man who had once stood up for me so fiercely. Was walking out of that party really such a betrayal in his eyes? Couldn't he see it for what it was? A desperate attempt to protect myself. The silence between us thickened. A week passed, and Mark still wouldn't speak to me. Meanwhile, I received a barrage of texts from his parents, calling me ungrateful and an embarrassment to the family. Desperate to save our relationship, I did something that felt like swallowing glass. I apologized. Not because I believed I was wrong, but because I loved him. I wanted us to survive this. But things only got worse. Mark began dragging me to weekly family dinners hosted by his parents. The first one was a disaster. As soon as we arrived, the tension in the room was suffocating. Charles and Mark's siblings threw me tight, awkward glances before quickly looking away. Mark left me standing alone while he greeted his family with warm hugs. Then Abigail spotted me. She approached like a storm cloud. "What are you doing here?" she snapped. I blinked, stunned. "Excuse me. You heard me. What are you doing in my house right now?" I tried to stay calm. "We were invited to dinner." "Wrong. Mark was invited. This is a family dinner. As Mark's wife, I am family, am I not?" "Absolutely not," she hissed. "An orphan like you has no place in this family. Did you think we wouldn't find out? We do background checks, Sarah. You're nowhere near my son's league." I swallowed hard. "Is that really all that matters to you? My background? Not my character? Not the way I love your son?" She sneered. "Love doesn't make you rich. If it did, the world would be full of billionaires. You're poor, plain, and disposable." I couldn't believe the cruelty. "Why are you being so superficial? You never gave me a chance." Abigail didn't answer. She simply shoved a wad of cash into my hand. "Take this. Buy yourself something better than shame. And leave." I turned to Mark, silently begging for support, but he just stood there, speechless, spineless. Tears burned in my eyes as I turned and walked out. The Uber ride home blurred behind tears. Mark didn't call, didn't follow. His silence stretched across days, then weeks. And when he finally did speak, it was cold, like I was the one who'd caused all this. For the first time in our marriage, I felt completely alone. Eventually, he resumed the weekly dinners. Alone. At first, that stung. But over time, I welcomed the quiet. I found myself again in the silence. One night, desperately needing comfort, I called my parents. "Hey, sweetheart," my dad said warmly. I broke down. "It's not going well." "What's wrong?" my mom asked, her voice tightening with concern. "Mark's family, they're cruel. They've made it their mission to humiliate me. His mother, she called me an orphan. To my face." There was a pause. Then my mom gasped. "She said what?" "Do they even know about us?" my dad asked. "No," I admitted. I didn't want them to like me just because of my background. I wanted them to judge me for me. There was a long silence. Then my mom said gently, "Are you sure this is the man you want to spend your life with?" "I love him, but I can't live like this anymore." "Don't worry," Dad said firmly. "We'll take care of it. We're coming next week." When they arrived, they treated me to a spa day, told me I deserved it. While I was getting pampered, they set their plan in motion. That evening, they showed up unannounced at one of Abigail and Charles's posh dinner parties. My dad later told me the atmosphere changed the moment they entered. Charles's expression froze. Abigail looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. "Mr. Lawrence," Charles stammered. "What brings you here?" My dad smiled coolly. "Oh, just saw some familiar faces and thought I'd say hello." "Familiar faces?" Abigail asked, confused. "Yes," he replied, scanning the room. "My daughter's in-laws. Although I don't see Sarah." "Where is she?" "Your daughter." Abigail echoed, pale. "Yes," he said simply. "Sarah's my daughter. My wife and I adopted her years ago. And I understand she's been treated poorly." Abigail tried to defend herself. "She hid that from us. She didn't want special treatment." My dad interrupted. "Now I see why." Then he turned to Mark and handed him an envelope. These are divorce papers. My daughter deserves better. They left without another word. Later, I learned several of my father's business partners had withdrawn support from Charles's company. It wasn't long before their empire began to collapse. Mark signed the divorce papers without protest. His family's messages kept coming, angry, bitter, blaming. But I didn't respond. I felt only peace. My parents whisked me away on a long vacation. I rediscovered who I was, free from judgment, free from shame. Losing Mark hurt, but what I gained was far greater. I learned I deserve respect, dignity, and love without conditions. And I'll never again settle for less.